So now we're going to look at deconstructing the HelloWorld Java program. So it's essentially the setup or the construct of a Java program. So this is with any language. I guess it goes way back to C, probably not so much assembler, but the first program that everybody writes is one that displays on the console Hello World. So we're going to have, if you may have done this when you installed Dr. Java, but here's Dr. Java and here's my Hello World. So we're going to have a look at what this all means. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to run this. So I click on compile and it says compilation completed, because Java, you remember from the previous section that Java is a compiled language and it's run in a virtual machine. So this is kind of done in the background for us. When we hit run, virtual machine is used, the JVM is used, and there we have the results. So we are running Hello World, and this is where I put it. I put it in, it's usually a good idea to put it under documents in a directory that means something to you and is literally about this class. So it says Hello World, it says Hello World again. So I can change this. When I change it, if I run it, it tells me the current document is out of sync. So I need to recompile it. So I have to compile it because I made a change and it's saying, well, that doesn't really match. So I compile it, and I'm going to say always save before compiling, because usually if I want to compile, I want to save it. So there we go. I compiled it, and then I run it, and there we go. It just says Hello World. So that's the program. So let's have a look at what all this means. So now you may have noticed in here we have a bunch of braces, and Dr. Java is nice for us. What it'll do is it'll actually match the opening and closing brace. So here I have my opening brace. If I put my cursor here, it shows me all of the code that's associated with it, and here all of the codes associated with that. So what's important about braces? They always have an opening brace, always has to have a closing brace. They're used to delimit blocks of code, and the blocks are mainly to help us keep track of what parts of the code are related. We'll get into that a little later. So it's sort of analogous to a unit of text or a paragraph almost. So it does a particular unit of work. We always have an opening brace, which gives us, the beginning of the block of code, and a closing brace at the end. And notice this one doesn't correspond with this one. So whenever I have an open, I have to have a close, but the most immediate close goes with the most adjacent open. So this one matches this, and this one matches this. So what happens if you remove the final one? So let's give that a shot. Let's see what happens here. If I remove this, what does Dr. Java think? Well, it's not giving me any closing point. It does have a closing point for this. Let's see what the compiler says. It says, syntax error, insert a closing curly brace to complete the class body. And it says the error is on line 4. Well, the error isn't really on line 4. The error is that this opening brace doesn't have a closing brace. So sometimes it'll tell you the line where the error is. Sometimes it's where it thinks it's where it finds the error and not necessarily the actual error. So now if I compile and run, it's working fine. So what about adding 3 closing braces? What happens then? So there's 3 closing braces at the end. Let's see what happens. Compile. It says line 6, syntax error on token, and it actually tells you to delete this token. So this one actually is the correct error. It won't always give you the correct error, but if I delete it, I compile, and I run, there we go, it's working now. So we have to have the right number of matching braces. So someday you're going to do this by accident, so it's good to see what it looks like. And it sort of gives you the idea that every matching brace, every opening brace has to have a closing brace. Think of it like at home, if you open a door, you should close it. So otherwise you get a compiler error. Why do you think you might get a compiler error? Well, because the compiler needs to know where things start and finish, just like you need to know where things start and finish. So we say that the curly braces are delimiters for blocks of code. Similarly, blanks are delimiters for words. So this phrase down here, similarly, you need to know where each word starts, blah, 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 blah. Well, we can probably read it, but it's not exactly certain. So what we do is we have blanks in there to delimit it, so we know where the words start and end. Same thing with the braces. It tells the compiler where the code starts and ends. So most of the time, not all the time, right before the curly brace, there'll be something that says what the code inside the curly brace is all about. So for the first curly brace here, we see that the code, it's telling us that it's a public class, HelloWorld. So it's a public class, and the name of the class is HelloWorld. So that's what it's telling us. So in Java, one of the key units of organization is a class. A class can have lots of things in it, and we'll see that throughout the term. But in this case, our class has one main method, and that's all. But classes generally have more than that. But at the beginning, we'll have one. So here we're saying I'm creating a class, and I want to call it HelloWorld, and I want it to be public, so anybody can use it. The difference between public and private and all of those good things, we're going to get to those as we get further in this course and other courses. As you can see here, we have the opening curly brace and the closing curly brace. So as I said before, inside my class, the next unit I have, before this curly brace, it's before the curly brace, second curly brace, it says we have a method. So this is a public static method that returns void, and the name of this method is main. And it takes one argument that's a string array called args. So you don't have to worry too much about this. These first two lines, you're going to need to use them, but we're going to kind of do a bit of hand wavy until we get further into the courses. But the only thing you're going to have to do here is you're going to have public class, and your class name will be different for every program you make. But you'll always have to have a public static void main with these arguments. So don't worry too much about what they are. This in Java this is called a method. In other languages, it's called a subroutine or a function. But because we're using objects and classes, this is a method in Java. So we're creating this method called main, and we're kind of hand wavy about the rest of it. And here we have our opening curly brace and our closing curly brace. So the most immediately adjacent closing curly brace is associated with this. So we have the beginning of the method and the end of the method. And before for the class, we had the beginning of the class and the end of the class. So what we're saying here is we have this method main that is part of the class HelloWorld. So we have the method main that is part of the class HelloWorld. And main is always the entry point of a Java program. So to enter any Java program, we execute the main method. So we always need to have a main somewhere. And in simple programs, we only have a main. We have our class, and we have our main method. So almost every line you write is going to be inside a class. It keeps things nicely organized, so it's associated with the class in any way you need to use it. And almost every line will also be inside of a method. So methods are a way of organizing chunks of information. So if I want to do some specific task, I will put that task in a method. For now, we're going to put everything in main because we're doing simple things, but we're going to get into methods pretty eventually. So the main method is the entry point, as I said before, to a Java program. So when you're running this Java program, you run this Java class. And if you have a main class, that is the entry point. It'll always start at the beginning of the method called main, no matter what class you run. So in our main method, we can put a lot of statements or commands. So telling Java, using the Java language syntax, we can do lots of things. We will implement our algorithm inside there with Java code. And this here in particular, this system out println, that's a statement. All statements in Java have to end with a semicolon. I know that can be a pain, but the compiler will catch that for you if you miss it sometimes. So here we have system out println, and the argument that we're giving this println is hello world. So system out println is a method, it's also a method, but it's not one we're writing, to print something on the screen. So everything that's between these, everything that's between these, the opening quote and close quotes, double quotes, that's going to be displayed on the screen. So we'll look at more things to do with this later, but that ends the deconstruction or the overview of our Hello World program. So we have a class called Hello World with a method called main, and whenever we execute this in the Java, when we compile this and create a class file, and we execute this in the JVM, whatever's in the main method will be executed. So that is why when we run this program, I've already compiled it, when we run this program, we see the result is Hello World on screen. We can also see it on the console. So this shows me everything. This shows me the console, and if I have any errors in the compiler, I would see them here. So I run it several times, so I always see Hello World. There we go.